Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men who are the go-to parents aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in their community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan, and our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have another podcast focused on global dad issues. We have various features, including Lead Dad of the Week. We have our community, online and in person. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. That's thecompanyofdads.com/thedad for our weekly newsletter. Today, my guest is Travis Perry, founder of the Make Time Institute. Travis says he was once a workaholic financial advisor until a light bulb went off and he realized he had to change or he'd be shortchanging his family of 7 kids and wife, as well as his own well-being. So he started the Make Time Institute, now works with financial and other professionals to reprioritize and create better balance in their lives. He's also written the book, Achieving Balance. Travis, welcome to the Company of Dads podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
All right, let's talk about your own epiphany that you wanted or needed to work differently. What happened? Give me the sort of before and after. What happened in that moment for you?
You know, it started before I was a financial advisor. I wanted to be a pilot. My dad actually was a big part of that. And when I was, I think I was 19 years old, he got me a lesson and I went down and flew this Cessna over the ocean in Southern California and honestly had the ride of my life. I thought, this is it. Like, I'm going to be a pilot. If I can fly above the clouds in the ocean and do this every day, like, this is brilliant. Like, how come nobody showed me this before?
Why does everybody want to be a pilot? This is fun.
Right. And you know, it's interesting. After we touched down, my dad, because I had to make this 180-degree kind of dive bombing land. I mean, it sounds like I'm landing on a aircraft carrier.
Like Top Gun here? What are you,
I'm like, I had to put on my
Gun?
suit. Yeah. No, but it was like this. I wasn't expecting. It was like, we have to do like kind of a 180 and down and bank. And he told me what to do. I'd never done it, but apparently he was trusting me because he thought I was doing pretty well. And I landed it. My dad gets out and he's like, Travis, did you land that or did the instructor? And the instructor's like, my hands were, on the controls and I was ready at any time, but he landed it. And my dad was like, oh, snap. Like and I didn't know this. My dad, I know he had fascination with planes, but I didn't know he took a lesson when he was my age and he wanted to be a pilot, but never got after it. He ended up in his family business and long story. Yeah. That moment made him say, I'm signing up. He got his license. He bought a plane. And we flew together for a little while. And, it's an expensive hobby if you don't do that for work.
Yeah.
But long story on this one is I really thought I was going to be a pilot professionally. And so I interviewed. And I tell all young people, if they're looking to get into anything, interview people, shadow, go check it out before you do a 4-year degree and hate your life because you're an accountant. Sorry, any accountants out there, love you. But, the reality is that happens to so many people. And as I interviewed a few of them, one of them said, do you like driving, riding in a bus? I'm like, well, I did that for several years on my, my proselyting mission for my church. It's not my favorite. He's like, do you like being gone from your family most of the time? And I'm like, no, I want a balanced life. Like, I want to own my own time. And he's like, you don't want to be a pilot. I'm like, oh, snap. Like, so he really
but I'm the Tiger Woods of piloting. The first time I got in a plane, I landed it. Don't you understand?
Yeah. I'm like, don't you get it? Yeah. So it's been a drive of mine. So I settled for, I'm going to get my pilot's license, very soon. I even have on my desk the aerodynamics for naval air aviators. Like, I bought this the other day from my professor, friend who actually runs the school here at Utah State for creating great pilots out of Utah. And so I'm reading that and I'm getting started. I'm getting ready. I've got a goal to get on that as a, for a hobby. But I will tell you this, that changed my life because I knew I wanted balance. I want to be there for my kids like my dad was there for me. While my dad may have not flown commercial jets or even, in the Top Gun era, flying around on naval aircraft carriers, he was there for my soccer games. He showed up and, helped out at church, in my youth groups. He was always there. And I wanted to give that to my kids, so much so that I knew even at like 21, I want to choose a path that will allow me to do that. And so I interviewed other people and I found this guy was like, hey, I really love what I do. And he was an accountant and financial advisor. He was a dual role. And he's like, hey, I get to make my own schedule. I make a lot of money. I help people with their goals on their, the financial side. And it just, the light bulb went off. I'm like, that's what I want. So I got into the industry thinking, I'm going to have freedom. I'm going to have flexibility. I'm going to have financial benefit, only to find out I was really running my own business and I was starting from scratch.
And let me just pause you just for the listeners here who don't understand the model. I mean, most financial advisors, maybe you get a fee for doing a financial plan, but for the most part, you're paid on assets under management. You're paid a standard fee of about 1%. But for you to get, somebody to give you 10 million bucks, let's say you have 30 people each give you their life savings and it gets you to 10 million bucks. You as an advisor can't really make a living off of that because you have all kinds of expenses and all things like that. So you really have to get to, 80, 90, $100 million to be making a decent living with all your expenses. And that is, of course, really hard because people aren't giving you their money in $1 million chunks, which even that would be 100 people. They're giving you $200,000 here, $400,000 here. And so you found that, raising the assets took quite some time to get you to that level that the accountant financial advisor you shadowed had already achieved, correct?
Precisely. Like you said it better than I could have ever. And what I did is I went after and I tried to find, could I partner with someone? Could I be their lackey? Could I be their underling? Could I
fly their plane for them? Could I fly their plane for them?
And can I fly their plane?
And be home
honest.
at night. Yeah.
That's it. Like, and that I actually made that work for a little while. And then I decided I needed to be independent and I needed to jump and start my own business. And I actually became more of the guy that I didn't want to be. In fact, I was trying to do everything, fooling myself, becoming what I call a do-it-all. I became a do-it-all, business owner and financial advisor because I thought if I could just do it faster and better than everyone else, and I could become really productive, which I call productive workaholic, it kind of led me that direction. If I could become really productive, then I could make this learning curve, this earning curve happen faster, and I could get to the sense of balance that I needed. But right about that same time, this all kind of happened all at the same time. All this dust was just kind of settling as my father, he was 49. And he and I had a great relationship. I got to fly planes with him. I got to work with him. I love my father and still do. But he passed away literally just suddenly on a Monday afternoon, riding his mountain bike with his friend on a trail that I've ridden with him hundreds, if not thousands of times. Of a massive heart attack caused by what they call the widowmaker. It's where one of your arteries is 90% clogged and the rest look just fine. Your blood pressure's fine. There's no signs. In fact, the only sign of this disease is heart attack and death. Yeah. And only 3% actually survive. And he was not one of the 3%. Crazy is one of his best friends riding with him was an EMT, and he worked on him for about a half an hour. He was a hero. Tried to save his life until medical teams arrived. I was 26. I've been a financial advisor for a few years, and I'm the oldest son. So I come home, and for 2 weeks, actually 2 months, I spent helping my mom get all of her affairs in order, pay everything off, get everything set up. I was the guy. I was 26. I barely knew like how to be married to my wife. I barely knew how to run a household, and yet all of those things were dumped on me. And I grew up, people looked at me like, man, you've aged like 10 years in about 2 months, just because of the impact it had on me. But it wasn't just like the stress. It wasn't that I didn't sleep. It wasn't that I was kind of depressed at that time, and it was grieving. I was going through grief, and it's natural and it's okay. But I was freaked out. I was freaked out because I look like my dad. I have the same genetics. Like I'm doing the same things, eating the same things, following his path, going, I want to make it to 100. I don't want to make it to 49 or 50. On the flip side, I also was incredibly inspired because I had to write his obituary. And I don't know if you've ever written an obituary, Paul, But that experience was not anything I was prepared to do. And everybody said, well, you write it, Travis. Like, everybody was helping out in different ways. But so I interviewed people and I looked at Dad's life. And quite honestly, after I wrote his obituary, and you write the good things and you write the best things about those people and the individuals. But I thought, would people say this about me? What if I died today? Am I accomplishing the things I want to accomplish? Am I becoming the person that I need to become?
Yeah.
And I had an epiphany right then and there. And I said, I need to change my life in a great measure, my career, my health, my relationships with my spouse, with my children who were just 2 and 1 at the time. We had 2 children. And, we ended up homeschooling, going plant-based. Like we did all of these things that people think, dude, you're weird. I'm like, I know I'm weird, but I'm doing these things because I know I need to make major change in my life. And it's not just a tiny little transformation.
Yeah. And that, is almost a little more than 15 years ago. Is that when you stopped being a financial advisor? When did you start the Make Time Institute and start coaching people?
That was a transition. And I thought, well, if I could start my own company, I could do some coaching while I was doing advising. Right. And that's where the idea
that's not making time. That's
no, it's not. I was actually doing 2 businesses at once. And then I had to make the decision, and it was actually during the recession. I had to make the decision right then and there. Do I focus on one or focus on the other? Because I became, again, this productive workaholic. I was a do-it-all, became a productive workaholic. And now I was really multitasking 2 businesses, trying to make it work as one. And I realized I'm a life coach. I'm not necessarily a financial advisor, but I was holding on to that dream, right? Because it was such a dream. And once I let go of being a financial advisor, I was able to now go do research. I went and did a master's and a PhD and started studying my theories. And I'm not just some coach who doesn't have anything behind him, except for maybe some life experience, which is good. That's good. But I wanted to be Dr. Perry. I wanted to establish a theory, test it, work it, and come back to the industry that I was thinking gave me balance, thinking gave me freedom and flexibility, only to find it was a 2-edged sword. So now I've made a living and a life, a business life of helping financial advisors to have better balance. They struggle, and they're actually, a lot of them, about 50 to 60% of them are what would be classified as a workaholic, according to the psychiatrists, the DSM-5.
Yeah. Talk about that. The word balance, we hear it. We've always heard a lot, but we hear it more than ever now in this sort of post-COVID world as people are trying to figure out, how are they going to work? How are they going to be parents? How are they going to be, spouses, or how are they going to be friends and children to their adult parents? What does balance mean to you?
That's the question I ask on every single one of my podcasts. We've interviewed over about 750 business owners, a lot of financial advisors and in industry, but now we're kind of going to entrepreneurs that are abroad. And I asked them that question. And what I found is that most people tell me it's a feeling. They feel balanced when the old 1980s, maybe even 90s version of what balance of work and life and having some kind of equilibrium is an absolute total myth, farce, whatever you want to call it. In fact, people still send me hate mail or social media comments of balance is a joke. And I agree with them. I say, I know. I wanted to write the book, The Myth of Balance. It would have been cool, but I think it was already taken. And so, I want to be positive and I want to be strengths-based. So I'm like, well, let's redefine balance. Let's talk about what achieving balance really is. And most people tell me it's when they are living their highest priorities. It's not necessarily a certain amount of time at work or a certain amount of time at home. It's also being present. Like it's doing all these things. But if I was to tell you the number 1, 2, 3 priorities in most people's life, physical health, spiritual health, relationship with spouse and family. Like those are the top 3 or 4. Yeah. Those things, if they are not being tended to, dads feel out of balance. They feel like they're missing something. And they know it because they don't sleep well, they don't eat well, they're not exercising, they're not connecting with God or the universe, whatever they feel is their spiritual life. They're not being a great dad or husband, and those things
Yeah.
are connected.
But when they're in that position, how do you help them? How do you help them to achieve the balance for themselves, or to I guess maybe reprioritize things? What are some of the things that you do
Yeah. So
tactically to
for
help them?
wonderful. First step is like get the priorities in order. What are your priorities? I talk about it in my book, Achieving Balance. I look at 10 areas of life and I teach them how to prioritize them. If they're struggling with that, and most people, they've always been told, put your priorities in order, but they've never done it. I actually have that exercise in the book. Thank you to Doug Carter. Big shout out to him. He's a great mentor of mine. He helped me to kind of develop this model. But so now what? Yeah, you've got your priorities in order. Well, now go ahead and decide in your ideal world, if you had an ideal week, an average ideal week, what would it actually look like? How many hours would you spend in every area? Once you've discovered that, once you decide what that is for you, I'm not the Dave Ramsey of how much time you put in every area. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Paul, and I'm not going to tell other dads what to do, but I'm going to ask them for them to go through that experiment and decide for them how many hours they should be spending. Once they've created that, then it goes on their calendar. On my screen next to me, I'm looking at you on one screen. On the other screen over here has my ideal calendar. And I know where I need to be spending my time on a daily, weekly, and even a yearly basis. I create an ideal calendar where I say, okay, these are the weeks we're taking off. And I take about 16 to 18 weeks off per year. I don't work Fridays. I work sometimes 4.5 days a week. Most Fridays, I don't have any appointments. I might reserve for if I need to come in, do something last minute before a vacation or some training or something like that. But I work 25 hours a week. And I've been doing this for literally, I don't know, over 10 years now. There have been times in my life where I have had to, for a period, maybe work, more than that, maybe even 50, 60 hours because I was struggling, right? But once I came up with this model and I realized something, if I could be super productive with my time and only work in what I call your work sweet spot, which is the 4 or 5 activities that I do really, really well. And, I may not be the best in the world, but I do them well. If I can just focus on those, delegate, automate, or delete everything else out of my life to my team, to others, then I can be as productive as humanly possible. Yeah. I can leave work after 25 hours and know that I can go snowboarding. I can go hang out with my wife. I can do all these things with no guilt, no issues, knowing that my business has doubled and tripled during times where everybody else is putting their head in the sand and really overworking because they're stressed out.
Yeah. And sometimes say, okay, that's great, Dr. P, but you work for yourself. I work for fill in the blank, Hasbro, IBM, Microsoft. There's no way I'm going to get by with that. How do you help those? Sure. Or your initial example of financial advisor. I work for Merrill Lynch. I work for Morgan Stanley. How do you help people in those positions, maximize that balance when they don't own their time the way you do?
Yeah. And remember, I'm not the Dave Ramsey of time. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I simply set up the principles and say, follow these principles. This is what I do, but I'm no way, shape, or fashion telling the world, you have to only work 25 hours or you're a bad dad. Like, that's not it. It's definitely find out how many hours you want to be working. What is your ideal calendar? Most people I meet with are 65, 70 hours a week by the time we track it. They think they're at 50 or 55. Yeah. But most people don't track it. So step number 1, if you want to change anything, track it. I have an app that a business partner of mine, he's developed a large part of it called Time Lift, LYFT, Time Lift. And you can track your time. You can learn from what it is that you're doing wrong, or you can simply take a sheet of paper and every half an hour write down what you did, or take a snapshot of your calendar, whatever that is. But track it, learn from what you're doing, and then decide, do you want to change? Most people that they prioritize their time, they look at those top 3 priorities, and I ask them, are you spending enough time in these top 3? And unequivocally, no, not as much as I'd like. So the make time method is, let's make you super productive in the time you have at work. If you're working a salary W-2 job, I'm not looking down at you at all. Like, I need people on my team that do that. And that's fine. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur. I don't believe that. However, if you're putting in 40 hours, put in the most productive 40 hours you can for your, boss and your manager. Be the best you can. When you clock out, be done, right? That's the beauty of having a job. It's hard for me as a business owner to clock out mentally for my job because it seems like, it's my baby, right? And that's another part of it, like being present. Business owners, they have the ability, and quite honestly, it's a two-edged sword. They could work 120 hours.
Yeah.
They could work 25 hours. And those who are on salary, I would say salary employees, same type of issue. If you're a salaried employee and you're working for your employer, it's like, hey, get this job done, get this project done. You might have a week where you are working way more than you'd like because you have a deadline. Totally understandable. I get it. But if that's what you do every week of your life for 52 weeks, you never take time off and you never see your family and you never see the gym, you're going to experience imbalance in a crazy fashion. So figure out what that is, set boundaries for yourself, and be able to live life outside of work, even if you love what you do. I hear this all the time, but Travis, is it really work if I love it? Of course it is. Like, if you didn't do that, what else would you do?
I'm actually a professional surfer, Travis. And so what else would I do?
I mean, Paul, let's go.
When I'm not surfing, my hobby is being a financial advisor. So I didn't know. But I think we're kids, and when you're kids, you have lots of free time. And, we used to play. I'm a couple years older than you, but I look at my own kids. I have 3, you have 7. And, I don't know how your kids are, but mine, we try to pump the brakes so we don't overschedule them. But a lot of kids in our neighborhood, in our town, are very scheduled. But, for us as adults, I feel like, that scheduling and that those hours, they ramp up. When you're in college, you're learning a lot, but you're also learning about yourself. And you have tons of free time. First job, you work, and then suddenly you go from this 40, 45 hours a week to, as you said, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. Almost, always on. So if you've gotten yourself into that position, which I think a lot of the listeners will be able to identify with, if you've gotten yourself into that position, you can't just go cold turkey, or maybe you can, some people, but what are your strategies for people to sort of work back and go from 70 to 65 to 60 to 55 without feeling like they're total, slackers, that they're still productive, and to do it in a way? How do they do that?
Sure. This is beautiful. Yeah. I actually mentioned this in Achieving Balance. I have a 90-day system. Like, in 90 days, you can change just about anything. Like, you really can. I love the quarter. Look at how the life is built for us on this planet in seasons, right? Now, aside from the fact that I still have 6 feet of snow on the front of my yard because we're having an absolute crazy winter. Like, most times, like, spring should be here in a couple of weeks, right? It should be melting. But that said, like, normally, we've got these seasons that will last about 3 months. I believe that if you can take 90 days and make a change in your life, you can do that with your health, you can do that with your relationship, you can do it with your time management, all of these things. So decide in 90 days from now, how much do I really want to be working? And if that's 40 hours, great, then mark it down. If that's 25 hours, great. If you're at 85 and you want to get down to 65, that's healthy. Like, that's a 20-hour drop. I guarantee that most people, my experience has been, when they look at where they're spending those hours at work, they're not in what I call their sweet spot. Okay. Sweet spot, like, is, you've played baseball, tennis, hockey, whatever, some kind of, even racket sports, like, like I mentioned, tennis. It's that spot on the racket or the bat or the wherever that is in whatever instrument you're using. It's right there where if you hit the ball, you don't feel it at all. It feels so natural. It feels so great. Most individuals, whether they're running a business or whether they're working for their boss or for the business, they are not working in their sweet spot, which I identify as your top 4 or 5 activities that really are the most valuable to the company or pay you the most if you're the owner, and the most enjoyable. Now, I'm not saying that if there's parts of your business that, have to be done, not to do them. If you're the business owner, you can delegate, automate, delete those things. Like AI is incredible
Yeah.
nowadays. You can do a lot of things. But also the importance of delegating. If you're the guy that's everything's being delegated to, then you have to figure out what are the most important things to get done. That's the trick. Because if you can do the most important things, you're going to be head and shoulders above of everyone else. You are going to be invaluable to your company. So what are those?
Yeah.
Focus on in the time now that you're going to be saving from not wasting it on all these other activities that are typically 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and on. I've seen like 25, 30 activities that people do. If they're down there, it's usually because they're afraid. They don't want to do those top activities because of some kind of limiting block or belief system that's keeping them from being in their sweet spot. And when I've actually tracked this with my clients, I found that they're only in their sweet spot to begin with when they work with me about 20 to 25% of the time. That means financial advisors or planners, they're not really financial advisors and planners. They're order takers. They are, lunch orderers. They are paper pushers. They're doing all these other things that aren't getting them to be as productive as they could be in their time.
I agree. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about at the Company of Dads is how do we reimagine the workday for everyone, and to admit that, those of us who worked in an office, pre-2020, in 2019, before, the pandemic started 3 years ago now, when we were in offices, we were not productive 100% of the time. We were not productive 75% of the time. Now, some of it was enjoyable. You go out and you get a cup of coffee with your friend, you go out and get a lunch or something like that, but lunches drag on. And, you suddenly, you could have spent your entire day in the office and really accomplished very little. Whereas if we sort of reimagine how we work and we work more efficiently and we sort of prioritize, when we do what we do, it's going to make a huge difference. Our focus is on dads. Yeah, obviously it's Company of Dads. How do you help, with that link between, masculinity and money and some really outdated views on, having to be the primary earner? How do you help men use your, ideas and your method around balance to become better fathers?
This is, I just interviewed Gary Cardone, Grant Cardone's brother. It's interesting. He's made a lot of money. He's been very successful. But at the very end of our conversation, he said, none of that matters. None of it. If someone shows up at my funeral, which I don't want them to anyway, but if they did, at my gravesite, said, I do not want them to tell, oh, he was such a great businessman. He did such great things. I only care that I was a good dad. And I said, Gary, that's exactly what I am all about. I did a PhD in family relations and human development to understand how my theory fits in. Like, is this really making sense? Can we really make time? And that's why we have the Make Time Institute. And I think, yes, you can. You have to make time for your highest priorities in life. And if your children are truly your highest priorities, how much time are you spending with them? Now, this gets us into the time discussion. Well, Travis, isn't it true that you could just have like good quality time and call it good? No, it's not. Quality and quantity are not the same, and they're not mutually exclusive. You actually need to spend time, quantity time in order to get those bits and pieces of quality time. I take Fridays and I go half day skiing or boarding with my younger kids or my older kids, sometimes on a Monday if we got it off. And we'll go skiing. And sometimes I'll just do that, just my daughter and I, just my son and I, 4 hours together. You know what we can talk about in 4 hours? Right. Obviously, we're skiing half the time, right? But on the lift, when it's just
sitting on the lift, a lot of sitting on the lift. Yeah.
That's invaluable time. Driving up and back, like we get into deep conversations. I believe that you need to make time for that. And if it's not on your calendar, then someone else is trying to pull you away. Something else is going to pull you away. If it doesn't get scheduled, it doesn't get done. Make sure that's in your calendar. I have 7 children. People ask me all the time, Travis, how do you do that? Well, I have an amazing wife. We homeschool our kids. We're very flexible. I take them on trips with me. We see the world. I teach them real world experiences, and we're very fortunate to do that. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying it's a lifestyle we've chosen, and we're fortunate. However, that said, it really has allowed me to spend a lot more one-on-one time. It allows me to do the things I want to do with my kids, teach them how to work. They work in my office sometimes. At a younger age, they may be the guy that's cleaning. They're cleaning the office at first before they get on phones and help me with things and back end of stuff. However, I have also found outside of work, outside of doing fun stuff together, I interview them every month. My wife and I, we have a conversation and we go over their goals. What are your goals in all these areas of your life? When they're young, it's like, my goal is to learn how to ski. My goal is to learn.
I want to be ABCs. A unicorn, Daddy. I would like to be a unicorn.
Paul, you and me both. Because then I could fly, right? I could fly.
And you'd have a cool horn, and people are like, that guy is.
Yeah, get out of my way.
That's kind of sweet.
Exactly.
No traffic.
It is sweet. Yeah, it's like a rhinoceros flying through the air. But the great thing about that is, I am my kid's coach. Parents are here to coach. They're not there to demand ultimate obedience. They're not there to be the kid's friend. And I've studied parental, methods and styles and balanced families for literally years. I've seen all the different systems out there, all of the greatest theories. And what I've discovered is the best way to be the greatest parent you can be is to coach them. How would you coach? Now, I'm not saying like on the sidelines, yelling at your kid as crazy, sometimes the fans get in a sports game. I'm talking about an individual coach. I pole vaulted in high school and I kind of fell into it because I was running track and I wasn't that fast and I wasn't too slow. So I was like, I was running the 400 and I hated it. And this guy came to me and said, hey, we're starting a pole vaulting team. People are going to try out, pretty much everybody will make it because there's nobody. Here's a pole. It flexes like this. You have to run, shove it in this metal box at the end of your runway without like impaling yourself. And then you've got to jump in the air. And when you get upside down, you actually need to turn in a 180, throw the pole over, flip yourself onto your back and land on this really soft part, not on the ground. You'll kill yourself in order to complete the event. I was like, oh, sure, I'll do that.
I've been working my entire life for this. This reminds me of my childhood. Like, yeah, sign me up.
No
coach.
Big deal.
Yeah.
At the first day, I think I was only jumping over it like front ways, like we had no idea what we were doing. A coach came out and, he worked with us individually. He helped me to clear almost 12 feet as a 10th grader. And that was huge. I went to state. I think I got like 5th place. I'm not amazing, but I did it. Like I was doing this thing. And I think that is where this world lacks, is we lack this coaching mentality for our own children, not just to discipline, not to be their friend, but someplace in the middle where it's a mentor, a coach. Someone that can teach you over time. Yeah, there may be time for discipline, but does it need to be corporal punishment? No, research has said absolutely not.
Right.
And do we just friend our children and hope that they'll like us? The point as a parent is not to be liked. The point is to teach and coach and mentor. Your child will thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you over and over again when they leave home and you've taught them life lessons that their friends didn't learn. And they will finally come back and say, thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad, for teaching me these things and not letting me off the hook, but loving me. Like there is a spot for love and mentorship. I think they can coexist. I'm not the, the author and the pretender of, this theory, but I do believe for me, as I've looked at everything over my life span of being a dad, having 7 children, seeing one of them off and into the world, and also learning from great research and other people, that if we're mentors and coaches, that's going to be the spot that we need to be in as dads.
Travis, thank you. This has been wonderful having you on. One last question here, because you've done a lot of thinking on this. You've achieved a lot yourself, but I'll use your example of taking your kids skiing. If you watch a downhill race, you watch the Olympics, you watch World Cup type level skier, the only people you see on TV are the ones who are skiing really well that day. There are a whole bunch of other amazing skiers who are having an off day and they're struggling. They, flew off the course, whatever. When you as a dad, you're talking a lot about, so the achievements, the balance you've attained in your life and the good parts with your kids. But what do you do when you make a mistake as a dad?
Mm.
When you're that skier who goes off the course and is out, how do you come back from that? Because I think that'll be really helpful to the listeners. Not just the everyday perfect, I got balance, but some days you're gonna be out of balance. Some days you're gonna make a mistake because you're a human. What are some of those mistakes, and how do you come back? Help the listener.
Brilliant. I kind of want to go back a little bit, and I'll get to that. But I think that where most dads are that I work with, they're stuck in what I call the workaholic trap. It's that place you and I have been talking about where they're a do-it-all, a productive workaholic, or even a personal developer. They're not really a balanced achiever, and they're stuck there, and they need help. They need coaching out. As I've been able to help coach them out of this trap and to be a balanced individual, now guess what? Now they have time to now start working on their goals. And the way that they stay balanced, the way that they keep their balance is by continually working toward their goals and their priorities. If it's just a simple, let me help you out of the trap, and 90 days I've come back and found out that they've fallen back in. Sure. They've fallen off the wagon.
Sure. Yeah.
So the whole idea of achieving balance is just to get you to the spot that now, guess what? Now you actually have time to be a good dad. Because that's what I found in my research is that time is the factor.
Or
so
you
now
may
you're
have just the time
Yeah.
to be a dad, whether a good or bad dad. You're just actually there to be
a dad. Yes.
Yeah.
100. I love that. Thank you, Paul. Just time to be a dad, to be a spouse, to be, healthy, to have a spiritual life. Like those are things that are the most important with people that I've seen in audiences around the country, even in Europe. I've tested these theories, and so what? So you make a mistake. Welcome to the club. I am not a perfect dad. Actually, there's some billboards that I really do like. If you're driving up and down the Wasatch Front here in the I-15 corridor by Salt Lake City, there's too many billboards, but one of them shows up and it constantly reiterates this idea of you don't have to be a perfect dad to be a good dad. We need to get past this idea of like, well, I've got to do everything right. Well, if we did everything right, we'd never have children and we wouldn't learn. My poor oldest kids, like they have learned from some of the things my wife and I have experimented on, right?
Right.
Our youngest children, hopefully we're better.
If number 7 doesn't turn out perfect, what hope do the rest of us have?
Exactly. But I will tell you this, as I've learned and grow, when we're in the car, a lot of times we love to go on long road trips, and we don't have screens in our cars. None. We've never done it, and we never will. Well, what in the world do you do? We listen to stories. We listen to books. Our kids learn with us. And quite often we're listening to parenting books and our kids are listening along. They're like, wait, what is that? Oh, that's so cool. And what's interesting about that is we're involving them in our learning. It's showing them that we're humble enough,
Travis,
and teachable enough.
That's giving the playbook to the enemy.
I know, exactly.
It's
that's
like, okay, here's how you invade. What?
Right?
Here are all of our weaknesses. Like,
yeah,
what?
Here's our game plan. And, once you get past that, like we're on the same team. It's not parents versus kids. It's a family team. Once you get past this idea of, well, it's like, well, you have 2 kids. Oh, now we got to go man to man. Now you have 3. Oh, it's your zone defense. No, that's the wrong thinking.
Yeah.
You're often the wrong. And I know it's just joking, but in a sense, like, well, we don't want to let our kids know what we're doing. Absolutely. You do. You want to let them know very clearly, this is your role. You're the child. I'm the parent. And your role is to follow and do these things, be a contributor to our family. My role is to provide, to nurture, to help you grow. And guess what? We're in this together. We're on the same team. My kids know that. So they know if I mess up, it's not a war. It's not defense. And I think that generation before me, and especially my parents, that generation, very militaristic, very much war. Right? They grew up, they served in the military. They did go overseas on naval aircraft carriers. My grandpa did. And I had another grandpa that served in Germany post World War II and had to, keep the peace. Right? So I get it. It's that militaristic style. It does not work. It works very well if you want to get your kids angry at you, resentment,
Yeah.
hurtful, hatred. Yeah, that works really well for that. But if you want loving, nurturing children that respond to you and respect you, the best thing to do is realize you're on the same team. So my parents didn't do this very well, and I love them. It doesn't matter what they did. I've had to forgive them of things, and I move on. Why? Because I know that I'm not a perfect parent.
Right.
And I need to forgive them. Start there. Forgive your parents of things that they've done wrong to you. And I know that's a hard thing to do for a lot of people. And that's a whole other segment, but that's a really great principle to start with. Forgive. Then be able to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for when you screw up, and then ask forgiveness. I lose my temper sometimes. I'm not the greatest
I do
person
this a
in the
lot.
world.
Like when I lose it, I say like, I'm sorry. You know, I go back out. I made a mistake.
Yeah.
This is
Exactly.
why I was anxious about this and that happened, and I'm sorry.
100%, Paul. And you're a better man, because it took me a long time for me to get there. And my wife and I had to have lots of discussions, and we learned a lot. And finally, I was like, she really wants me to say sorry when I've screwed up. And I realized my kids benefit for seeing their grown father say, dude, I messed up. That's not a weakness. It's humility. Meekness is not weakness.
Oh, it's a strength. It shows that you have self-confidence, that you can say, you know what, I made a mistake, and let's talk about Dad's mistake. Yes. Because you're going to make mistakes. Because otherwise, it's always I agree with you 100%.
It's, you know, and I came into work this morning and I saw on this guy's dashboard, and it had this pointed arrow my way, and right underneath it another pointed arrow different way, and it said the highway. And I'm like, that's a lot of times how parents parent. It's my way or the highway, right?
Yeah.
Or that's the militaristic, or there's the really like, let me befriend you and go to school with you and help you. You're not teaching them. Like you're coddling this generation. Quit it. Stop it. Love them. Give them boundaries. Teach them. Expect greatness, and they will show up. Now, back to this idea then, well, how do you do this? Well, if I lost my temper and all the family saw, I gather the whole family and I say, I'm sorry, I did this. I'm going to try to do better. And, you know, this is what I need to work on. If children, if they're getting out of line and they're out of the family rules and boundaries, which you need to set, they need to be out there. You can't just expect them to figure it out. You need to tell them. And you need to tell them a lot of times, like over and over. But once they get outside of those family boundaries, you need to be able to have a system in place for consequences, good and bad. When they do well, there needs to be a great consequence for, you know, for them. And that might be just a hug. It might be a kiss. Maybe I love you. Great job. Maybe going out to dinner, whatever it is. But when they go outside of those boundaries and they've done wrong, you need to be able to teach them, and they need to know that that was not correct without yelling at them, putting them down, making them feel stupid. We talk about bullying and all these things at school. What about in our own homes, our own families? Are we the bullies? Is that how we're raising our children? I don't think so. And when I've crossed those lines, and when I've, you know, made it clear that I've gone outside of the role that I have as father and nurturer and provider and all these things, when I've messed up, when I've apologized, my kids know I'm working on it. They give me grace. They give me slack. And I give them slack too, because I know they're working on their side of trying to grow, and their mind is developing, and their body and their hormones and emotions and needs, and it's changing. And as they grow and change, I look at them differently and help them in different forms or fashion. The theory that I like to follow is, you know, look at a skyscraper. As you build a skyscraper, as you build a building, you've got all of the scaffolding around the building. Okay. Well, at the very beginning, it's this hole in the ground, and then you build it up, and the scaffolding grows and grows. You know, when it's super tall, you've got the scaffolding that reaches all the way up to the skyline. But as it starts to finish, they start to take down the scaffolding, right? There's no more scaffolding. There's no more cranes. There's no more big equipment. And then maybe doing some finishing touches. A child is like that. And I really believe in this idea. When they're young, there's a lot of help. There's a lot of scaffolding. There's a lot of, you know, attending to details. But over time, you've got to let go. You've got to let go of some of the scaffolding as it becomes its own human being, its own, you know, building, so to speak. And you let them make more mistakes. In fact, they learn from those mistakes, and then they'll come back to you and say, Dad, what did you do? How did you do this? What about this? And now that they're a parent, oh boy, they come back to you more because they know you're going to continue to mentor them through your life.
Dr. Travis Perry, thank you again. Founder of the Make Time Institute and the author of Achieving Balance. I've thoroughly enjoyed having you on the Company Dads podcast today.
Thank you, Paul, for letting me be on, and grab the book at achievingbalancebook.com for free. We'll ship it out to you guys. Thank you for being a great audience.
Hey, thanks for listening to Company of Dads podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. But I'm here to tell you it's just one of the many offerings we have at the Company of Dads. We've got another podcast. We have a weekly newsletter. We have various features. We have events that we put on both online and in person. If you want to know about all of those, the best place to learn about them is to go to thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. That's thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. What do you get if you do that? That's how you sign up for our weekly newsletter, The Dad, which is a one-stop shop for all things Lead Dad. Thank you again for listening.